A young mother walks into a billionaire's office, her hands shaking, her eyes full of tears. "Please, just make it quick," she whispers, ready to give up everything to save her sick little girl. But instead of cruelty, he does something no one expected. The man known for his cold heart suddenly offers her a lifeline, and it changes both their lives forever. At first, it seems like a miracle, until the world finds out. Rumors spread, reputations crumble, and the kindness that saved her could now destroy him. Behind closed doors, secrets from the past start to surface, secrets that could rewrite everything they thought they knew about love, faith, and second chances. What will happen when compassion costs everything? And when the truth finally comes out, will it break them or set them free? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ryder Ward's office, casting shifting shadows across the polished mahogany desk. Rose Brooks stood there, water dripping from her coat onto the plush carpet, clutching the damp eviction notice in trembling fingers. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she forced herself to meet the billionaire's piercing gaze. Her voice caught. She swallowed hard and tried again. "Please, just make it quick." Ryder Ward's expression shifted almost imperceptibly as he studied her face. His steel-grey eyes narrowed, then widened with recognition. He stood slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the warm lamplight. "You're Henry Brooks' daughter." Rose's knees nearly buckled at the mention of her father's name. She hadn't expected him to remember, let alone make the connection. "Yes," she whispered. "Your father was the night janitor here for 15 years. Ryder's voice had lost its sharp edge. He walked around his desk, his movements measured and deliberate. "He used to leave coffee on my desk when I worked late. Even in summer he wore that old brown sweater." Tears pricked at Rose's eyes. The memory of her father in that worn sweater, heading off to work with a thermos and a smile, hit her like a physical blow. "He always said you were kind to him." "Kind?" Ryder's laugh was soft, bitter. "He was kind to me. I was just less unkind than others might have been." He gestured to one of the leather chairs. "Sit down, Ms. Brooks. You're shivering." Rose sank into the chair, her wet clothes making her uncomfortable, but the warmth of the office was already seeping into her cold bones. She clutched her purse tighter, the photograph of Sheila inside feeling like it was burning through the fabric. "Now," Ryder said, leaning against his desk rather than returning to sit behind it. "Explain to me why Henry Brooks' daughter is in my office at 9 o'clock at night, offering herself to me for money." The blunt words made Rose flinch. Shame colored her cheeks, but desperation pushed her forward. She pulled out the photograph and held it out with trembling fingers. "This is my daughter, Sheila. She's 6 years old." Ryder took the picture, studying the smiling child with her gap-toothed grin and bright eyes. "She has your smile," he said quietly. "She needs surgery." The words tumbled out now, each one carrying the weight of sleepless nights and endless worry. "She was born with a heart condition. The doctors say without the surgery she won't make it to her next birthday. Insurance won't cover it. I've tried everything. Second jobs, loans, selling everything we own. But the eviction notice came today, and Her voice broke. "I can't let her die. I can't." The silence that followed was broken only by the steady rhythm of rain against glass. Ryder Ward stood perfectly still, the photograph of Sheila still in his hand, his expression unreadable. "And this?" he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "Led you to conclude that selling yourself was the answer?" Rose's hands twisted in her lap. "I didn't know what else to do. The surgery costs $250,000. The rent is 3 months behind. Sheila's medications alone—" She took a shuddering breath. "I'm out of options, Mr. Ward. Out of time. Out of hope." Ryder moved suddenly, startling her. He walked to the window, staring out at the rain-slicked city below. His reflection in the glass showed a face carved from stone, but his eyes looked haunted. "Your father," he said, still facing the window, "was the first person who ever showed me genuine kindness. Did you know that?" Rose shook her head, then realized he couldn't see her. "No," she said softly. "I was 22, just taken over my first company, working 18-hour days, sleeping in my office. One night I was sitting here, staring at spreadsheets until the numbers blurred. Your father came in to empty the trash. He took one look at me and left. Came back 10 minutes later with a sandwich and coffee." Ryder turned from the window. He said, "Can't change the world on an empty stomach, son." A sob caught in Rose's throat. That sounded exactly like her father, always taking care of others even when he had so little himself. After that, he'd check on me every night he worked. Never intrusive, never asking for anything. Just kind. Ryder's voice grew quieter. When he got sick, he apologized for having to quit. Apologized as if he owed me something. Rose remembered those last months of her father's illness, how he'd worried more about others than himself until the very end. The memory made her current situation feel even more desperate, more shameful. "Ms. Brooks," Ryder said, his voice suddenly businesslike. "I'm going to make you an offer, but first I need you to understand something." He walked back to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. "Sarah, bring me the file on Project Heartlight." Rose sat, straighter, confusion warring with hope and fear. "Mr. Ward, your father taught me something important, something I've spent years trying to forget because it made business more complicated." He met her eyes directly. "He taught me that true kindness doesn't come with strings attached." The office door opened, and a secretary hurried in with a thick folder. Ryder took it, nodded his dismissal, and opened the file on his desk. 2 years ago, I started a medical foundation. It provides funding for children who need life-saving procedures their families can't afford. He looked up at Rose. "It's called the Henry Brooks Foundation for Children's Medical Care." Rose's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "What? Your father never knew. It was established after his death. We've helped 37 children so far." Ryder pulled out a form and began filling it out. "Sheila will be number 38. But—" Rose could barely speak through her tears. "I don't understand." "The foundation will cover all of Sheila's medical expenses, surgery, recovery, medications, everything." He continued writing. "As for your housing situation..." He pulled out a business card and scribbled something on the back. "This is the address of an apartment building I own. 3-bedroom, ground floor unit. It's yours, rent-free, for as long as Sheila needs to recover." Rose stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "Why?" she whispered. Ryder set down his pen and looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment she saw past the powerful businessman to something vulnerable underneath. "Because your father was right. Kindness matters. And because no parent should ever have to—" He gestured vaguely at her, at the situation that had brought her to his office. "This isn't a loan, Ms. Brooks. It's not charity. Consider it a very belated thank you to the man who taught me that success means nothing if we don't use it to help others." The rain continued to fall outside, but inside Ryder Ward's office something had changed. Rose sat there, clutching the business card and the foundation paperwork, her tears now ones of relief and gratitude. And Ryder Ward, the billionaire CEO known for his cold efficiency, stood at his window and watched the city lights blur through the rain, remembering an old man in a brown sweater who had changed his life with a simple act of kindness. As Sarah closed the office door behind her, Ryder Ward stood motionless, staring at Rose Brooks with a mixture of disbelief and dawning recognition. The name Brooks echoed in his mind, stirring memories he'd buried beneath 20 years of ruthless ambition and calculated success. "Henry Brooks," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "Your father was Henry Brooks." Rose's eyes widened. You knew my father." Ryder moved away from his desk, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows, where rain traced silvery patterns against the dark glass. His reflection stared back at him, expensive suit, perfect tie, carefully managed appearance. But in his mind, he saw a much younger version of himself, shivering in thin clothes on a cold winter morning. "I was an intern here," he said, his voice distant with memory. 20 years ago, couldn't afford proper clothes. Your father." He paused, struggling with emotions he usually kept locked away. "He found me trying to warm up in the break room one morning. Didn't say a word, just took off his coat and handed it to me. Wouldn't take no for an answer." Rose's hands trembled in her lap. "That sounds like Dad. He always said a person's worth wasn't in what they owned, but in what they gave away." "It was a brown wool coat," Ryder continued, turning back to face her. "Worn at the elbows, probably second-hand itself, but it was warm." He studied her face, the same honest eyes as her father, the same quiet dignity despite desperate circumstances. "I tried to return it the next day. He just smiled and said, 'Keep it, son. Winter's long, and you've got places to go.'" The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Rose sat very still, her shoulders no longer bent with shame, but with grief, the familiar ache of missing her father's steadfast presence. "Tell me about your daughter," Ryder said suddenly, his voice gentler than before. Rose's composure cracked slightly. "Sheila. She's 6. She pulled a slightly crumpled photograph from her purse, a smiling child with her father's kind eyes. "She was born with a heart condition. The doctors say she needs surgery, but the insurance—" She stopped, swallowing hard. Ryder took the photograph, studying the young face. "How much?" $250,000. Rose's voice was barely a whisper. "I've tried everything. Second job, loans, selling everything we own. But it's not enough, and time is running out. That's why I—" She couldn't finish, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Something shifted in Ryder's expression, a softening around his eyes, a slight relaxation of his usually rigid posture. He walked back to his desk and sat down, his movements deliberate. "I'm going to make you an offer, Ms. Brooks," he said, his tone professional but not cold. "This company needs a new personal assistant. The position comes with full medical benefits, effective immediately. The starting salary is $120,000 per year, with a signing bonus of $300,000. Rose stared at him, uncomprehending. I don't understand." "It's simple," Ryder continued. "You need a job. I need someone I can trust, someone with integrity." He leaned forward slightly. "But I have one condition." Rose tensed, waiting. "You must promise me," he said firmly, "that you will never again consider degrading yourself the way you were prepared to tonight, no matter how desperate things become." Fresh tears spilled down Rose's cheeks, but these were different. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of restored dignity. She nodded, unable to speak. Ryder picked up his phone. "Sarah, prepare the standard employment contract for a personal assistant position. Add a medical benefits rider with immediate effect." He glanced at Rose. "And set up an immediate wire transfer for $300,000 to—" He raised an eyebrow questioningly. Rose fumbled in her purse for her banking information, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. Ryder took it gently, reading the numbers to Sarah. "The transfer will be complete within the hour," he said after hanging up. "You can schedule Sheila's surgery first thing tomorrow." "Mr. Ward," Rose began, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't," he said quietly. "Your father's kindness came without strings. Consider this the same." He stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. "Report to HR tomorrow at 9 o'clock. They'll handle the paperwork." Rose gathered her things, still moving as if in a dream. At the door, she turned back. "My father would be proud," she said softly. To know his simple act of kindness meant so much. Ryder didn't respond, but his expression flickered with something undefined. He watched as she left his office, her steps lighter now, her shoulders straight with restored dignity. Standing at his window, he looked out at the rain-washed city, feeling something unfamiliar stirring in his chest, a warmth he couldn't quite name, a shift in his carefully ordered world. In the quiet of his office, the memory of a worn brown coat and a kind smile seemed to hover like a ghost, reminding him of a truth he'd forgotten somewhere along his climb to the top, that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of a life. He touched his tie, straightened it automatically, and tried to focus on the work still waiting on his desk. But something had changed. In him, in this room, in the very air he breathed. He couldn't name it yet, this shifting in his soul. But as he sat back down at his desk, he knew with absolute certainty that he would never see the world quite the same way again. The morning sky hung like a soft grey blanket over Atlanta, promising a gentler day than the stormy night before. Rose Brooks woke before her alarm, her heart racing with a mix of anxiety and hope. She lay still for a moment, letting yesterday's miracle sink in again, a job, medical coverage for Sheila, and enough money for the surgery. In the tiny kitchen of their one-bedroom apartment, Rose stirred a pot of oatmeal, adding a sprinkle of brown sugar, Sheila's favorite. The spoon clinked against the chipped bowl as she watched steam rise in the early morning light. "Mommy?" Sheila's sleepy voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her faded pink pajamas, her dark curls tousled from sleep. "Good morning, sweetheart." Rose smiled, kneeling to hug her daughter. "I made your favorite breakfast, and guess what? Mommy got a real job." Sheila's pale face lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. "A real one? With a desk and everything?" "Yes, baby, a real one in a big building downtown." Rose touched Sheila's forehead. "Still warm, but not as bad as yesterday. And soon we'll be able to see those doctors who will make you feel better." Sheila climbed onto her chair, legs swinging. "Will you wear fancy clothes like the ladies on TV?" Rose laughed softly, thinking of her one good dress and worn blazer. "We'll see about that. Now eat your oatmeal while it's warm." After breakfast, Rose walked Sheila next door to Mrs. Lillian Harper's apartment. The elderly woman opened her door with a warm smile, the smell of fresh-baked muffins wafting into the hallway. "There's my sweet girl," Mrs. Lillian said, opening her arms to Sheila. "And Rose, you're glowing this morning. Something's changed." Rose quickly explained about the job, leaving out the desperate circumstances that led to it. Mrs. Lillian's eyes filled with tears. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said softly. "Your father would be so proud, Rose." "Thank you for watching her," Rose said, hugging Sheila goodbye. "I'll be back as soon as I can." The bus ride downtown felt different today. Rose watched the city wake up through rain-spotted windows, clutching her worn leather bag that held a small notebook and pen, all she could afford for her first day. Ward Industries Tower rose before her, no longer threatening but full of possibility. Inside, the security guard from last night nodded with recognition, handing her a temporary badge. The elevator carried her to the top floor, where Clara Jenkins waited by the reception desk, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the marble counter. "Rose Brooks," Clara said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Follow me." Clara's heels clicked efficiently across the polished floor as she led Rose through the office. "Mr. Ward expects absolute precision. His schedule must be maintained to the minute. You'll handle his email correspondence, meeting preparations, and calendar management." Rose took careful notes as Clara demonstrated the computer systems, explained filing protocols, and listed Ryder's preferences. Everything from how he liked his coffee, black, no sugar, to which clients required immediate responses versus those who could wait. "He has 57 unread emails from yesterday," Clara said, pulling them up on the screen. "Handle those first. Draft responses for his review." By midday, Rose had cleared the inbox, memorized Ryder's weekly schedule, and organized 3 upcoming board meetings. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her mind focused entirely on each task. She barely noticed when Ryder himself walked past her desk, only looking up when he cleared his throat. "Ms. Brooks," he said formally, not quite meeting her eyes. "The Anderson contract needs review by 4 o'clock. "Yes, Mr. Ward. I'll have it on your desk by 3:30. He nodded and disappeared into his office. Clara watched the interaction with narrowed eyes before returning to her own desk. The day passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings, and documentation. Rose worked through lunch, not wanting to risk falling behind. By 5 o'clock, her head was swimming with information, but she felt oddly satisfied. She had done it. Survived her first day in a world so different from anything she'd known before. The bus ride home felt longer, her body aching from sitting in an unfamiliar chair all day. But when she opened Mrs. Lillian's door, the sight of Sheila curled up on the couch, her fever noticeably lower, made everything worth it. She had a good day, Mrs. Lillian whispered. Ate all her lunch and even drew some pictures. Rose gathered her sleeping daughter in her arms, carrying her the short distance home. In Sheila's tiny bedroom, she knelt beside the bed after tucking her in. The streetlight outside cast a soft glow through the window as Rose closed her eyes, clasping her hands together. "Dear God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank you. I know I haven't talked to you in a while, not since—" She swallowed hard. "But thank you for this chance, for Sheila's surgery, for Mr. Ward's kindness. Please help me do this right. Help me be strong enough. Amen." Across town, in his luxurious penthouse apartment, Ryder Ward stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a glass of scotch he hadn't tasted. In his other hand was an old photograph, worn at the edges, himself as a young intern, standing next to a janitor in a maintenance uniform. Henry Brooks' kind face smiled up at him, unchanged by time. "I owe you one, old man," Ryder whispered to the photograph. He remembered that cold winter morning when Henry had found him shivering in the lobby, too proud to admit he couldn't afford a proper coat. Without a word, Henry had taken off his own worn brown coat and draped it over Ryder's shoulders. When Ryder tried to refuse, Henry just smiled and said, "Sometimes we all need a little help to keep going." Ryder set the photograph down on his desk, next to a stack of quarterly reports and acquisition proposals. The contrast between the simple snapshot and the trappings of his success felt stark, meaningful. He thought of Rose Brooks, working diligently at her desk today, carrying the same quiet dignity her father had shown all those years ago. The city lights twinkled below, a constellation of artificial stars. In 2 separate parts of Atlanta, 2 people lay awake. One in a cramped apartment with hope in her heart, the other in a luxury penthouse with memories in his mind, both transformed by a simple act of kindness that had echoed across 20 years. The days melted together like watercolors on a canvas. Rose settled into her role at Ward Industries with quiet determination, each morning bringing new challenges that she met with steady grace. Her desk became a command center of efficiency, calendar notifications chiming softly, emails sorted with precision, and always a fresh cup of coffee waiting when Ryder emerged from meetings. What stood out most was her way with people. When angry clients called, Rose's gentle voice and genuine concern turned their fury into calm cooperation. During chaotic moments, like the server crash that sent the office into panic, she maintained her composure, systematically working through problems while others lost their heads. "Ms. Brooks," Ryder found himself saying more often, "would you handle the Peterson account? Or could you join this meeting?" Her presence brought a steadying influence he hadn't realized he needed. The weeks passed, and small changes appeared in Ryder's behavior. His curt nods became actual greetings. His closed office door started staying open more often. Sometimes Rose caught him watching her work, his expression thoughtful. One evening, as the office emptied and the sky darkened to deep purple, Rose carried a fresh cup of coffee into Ryder's office. He had an important video conference with investors in 10 minutes. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the cup, the china clinking against the saucer. Ryder looked up sharply. "When did you last eat?" I'm fine, Mr. Ward," Rose said, but her voice wavered. "Sit." He pointed to the chair across from his desk. When she hesitated, he added more firmly, "That's not a request, Ms. Brooks." Rose sank into the leather chair, too exhausted to argue. Ryder pressed a button on his phone. "James, bring up 2 sandwiches from the cafe, and some fruit." "Sir, I really don't need— You've been here since 6 this morning." He interrupted. "I noticed." They sat in awkward silence until James arrived with a tray. Ryder pushed a sandwich toward her. "Eat." Rose took a small bite, then another. She hadn't realized how hungry she was. The turkey and avocado sandwich tasted like heaven after hours of nothing but coffee. "How is Sheila doing?" Ryder asked suddenly, his voice softer than usual. Rose's face brightened at her daughter's name. "Better, actually. The new medications are helping. And—" She paused, a smile touching her lips. "The doctor's scheduled her surgery for next month." Ryder nodded, something easing in his expression. "Good. That's good." He seemed to want to say more, but instead took a bite of his own sandwich. "She drew you a picture," Rose said hesitantly. "Sheila, I mean. She calls you Uncle Ryder now. I hope you don't mind." For a moment, Ryder's carefully maintained mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable underneath. He cleared his throat. "I don't mind." They finished their impromptu dinner in companionable silence. When Rose stood to leave, gathering the empty plates, Ryder spoke again. "Make sure you eat lunch tomorrow, Ms. Brooks. I need my assistant functioning at full capacity." "Yes, sir." She smiled, understanding the concern hidden beneath his brusque tone. After she left, Ryder stood at his window, watching the city lights flicker on like stars. The ache in his chest was unfamiliar, warm and uncomfortable at the same time. He pushed it away, focusing instead on his upcoming call. The next morning arrived with its usual bustle of activity. Rose was organizing the day's schedule when she heard Clara's voice carrying from the break room. "It's really quite sad," Clara was saying to a group of administrative assistants. "I mean, everyone knows why she's really here. The poor little charity case Mr. Ward felt sorry for." Rose's hand stilled on her keyboard. Through the open door, she could see Clara holding court, her perfectly manicured hands gesturing expressively. "I suppose we should be grateful," Clara continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. At least she's not asking for handouts anymore. Though, between you and me, that's essentially what this job is. The other assistants shifted uncomfortably, but no one contradicted her. Rose felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept typing, each keystroke measured and deliberate. She thought of Sheila's bright smile when she'd shown her the calendar, counting down the days until her surgery. She thought of Mrs. Lillian's proud face when Rose had paid her properly for childcare instead of promising to pay later. The whispers and sidelong glances followed her throughout the day. When she delivered reports to department heads, their thanks seemed tinged with pity. When she organized the conference room for the afternoon meeting, she heard murmurs stop abruptly as she entered. But Rose held her head high. She checked Ryder's schedule 3 times for accuracy, prepared his presentations with meticulous care, and answered every email with professional courtesy. She had worked too hard, come too far, to let pride or hurt feelings derail her now. During her lunch break, she retreated to the small garden terrace on the 20th floor. Sitting on a bench surrounded by potted plants, she pulled out her phone and looked at her favorite photo of Sheila. Her daughter was laughing in the picture, her face glowing despite the tubes in her nose. "What would you say about all this, baby girl?" Rose whispered to the image. "Probably something wise beyond your years, right?" She could almost hear Sheila's voice. "But, Mommy, didn't you tell me that what other people think doesn't matter as much as what we know is true?" Rose tucked the phone away, straightened her shoulders, and returned to her desk. Clara's words might sting, but they couldn't touch the core of what mattered: Sheila's health, this chance at a better life, and the quiet satisfaction of doing her job well. As she worked through the afternoon's tasks, Rose remembered something her father used to say. "Character isn't built in the spotlight, Rosie. It's built in the shadows, when nobody's watching, and doing the right thing is its own reward." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and spreadsheets. Rose stayed focused on each task, letting the whispers wash over her like rain on a window. She had weathered worse storms than office gossip. Sheila's surgery was just weeks away. That was the only thing that truly mattered. When evening came, she gathered her things quietly, her dignity intact. Tomorrow would be another day, another chance to prove herself not through words but through actions. As she waited for the elevator, she heard Clara's laugh echoing from the break room, but Rose smiled anyway. Some victories were silent ones, won in the heart rather than in the open. The elevator doors opened, and Rose stepped inside, holding her head high. She had her father's strength, her daughter's hope, and her own quiet determination. No amount of gossip could take that away. Friday evening settled over Atlanta like a soft blanket, the weekend promise emptying offices across the city. At Ward Industries, the usual exodus had begun, leaving behind the hollow echo of footsteps in marble hallways and the gentle hum of cleaning crews beginning their rounds. Ryder Ward sat at his desk, reviewing the week's reports. The setting sun painted his office in shades of amber and gold, catching the silver in his temples. He'd loosened his tie hours ago, the casual gesture betraying the long day's toll. His phone buzzed, displaying a number he hadn't seen in months. Darren Cole. Ryder's jaw tightened as he answered. "Ward speaking." "Ryder, old friend." Darren's voice oozed false warmth. "Beautiful evening, isn't it? Perfect time to discuss your newest acquisition. If this is about the Palmer contract." "Oh no, nothing so mundane." Darren chuckled, the sound like ice cracking. "I'm more interested in the woman you're protecting." "What was her name? Rose Brooks?" Ryder's hand froze on his pen. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Your point, Cole." "Just curious about your hiring practices these days, particularly when they involve desperate women making Interesting propositions. Tell me, is that your standard interview process now? Blood roared in Ryder's ears. Someone had talked. Someone who knew about that night. Whatever game you're playing, Cole. Game. I'm simply concerned about industry standards. Darren's voice dripped with mock sincerity. Though I must say, it makes for fascinating gossip at the country club. The great Ryder Ward taking in strays. Stay away from her. Ryder's voice was deadly quiet. And stay away from my company. Or what? Darren laughed. Face it, Ward. Your pristine reputation won't survive this scandal. A CEO taking advantage of a desperate single mother. The press will have a field day. Ryder ended the call, his hands shaking with rage. He knew exactly where this leak had originated. There was only one person besides himself who knew the full story of Rose's first visit. He pressed the intercom. Clara, my office, now. Clara appeared moments later, perfectly, composed in her tailored suit. Yes, Mr. Ward. Shut the door. She complied, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Something in Ryder's expression made her pause. Who did you tell about Rose Brooks? Clara blinked, her practiced smile faltering. I'm sorry. Don't. Ryder's voice was steel. Who did you tell about the night she came here? About why I hired her? Colour drained from Clara's face. I may have mentioned something to Mr. Harrison from the board. He asked why you'd hired someone without experience. You had no right. Each word fell like a hammer. That information was private. I was only trying to protect the company's interests. Clara's composure cracked. She came here to save her daughter's life. Ryder stood, his shadow stretching across the desk between them. And now you've handed that story to Darren Cole. Clara's eyes widened. Mr. Cole, Harrison plays golf with Cole every Sunday. Ryder's laugh was bitter. You've worked here 15 years, Clara. You know exactly how information travels in this circle. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. Mr. Ward, please. I was only... Cleared out your desk by Monday. He turned to the window, dismissing her. Your severance package will reflect your years of service. That's more generosity than you've shown others. But goodbye, Clara. She fled the office, mascara streaking her cheeks. Ryder stood at the window long after she left, watching the city lights blur through the glass. When Rose appeared in his doorway with her usual quiet presence, he almost startled. Your last meeting cancelled, she said softly. Would you like me to call your driver? Ryder studied her face, tired but peaceful, unaware of the storm gathering around her. No, I'll drive you home tonight. Oh, that's not necessary. Please. The word surprised them both. The elevator ride was silent. In the parking garage, Rose followed him to his sleek black car, sliding into the passenger seat with careful movements. The leather probably cost more than her monthly rent. They drove through streets growing misty with evening fog. Rose gave quiet directions, but otherwise stayed silent, sensing his mood. The streetlights cast moving shadows across their faces. Finally, as they turned onto her street, Ryder spoke. Whatever you hear about yourself in the coming days, ignore it. You've done nothing wrong. Rose turned to him, confusion creasing her brow. Mr. Ward, you're good at your job, Rose. That's all that matters. He pulled up to her building, a modest apartment complex with peeling paint but well-tended flower boxes. Thank you, she said softly, though her eyes held questions. For everything. He watched her walk to a door, fumbling slightly with her keys in the dim light. When she was safely inside, he pulled away, his taillights cutting red trails through the thickening mist. Rose stood at her window, watching the expensive car disappear into the fog. Something in his manner tonight had been different, protective, almost worried. But before she could dwell on it, Sheila's voice called from the bedroom, and Rose turned away from the window toward the light of her daughter's smile and the comfort of their evening routine. Neither she nor Ryder could know that this quiet Friday evening marked the beginning of a storm that would test not just their professional relationship, but the very foundations of trust, courage, and redemption they'd begun to build. Monday morning dawned with an unsettling quiet over Atlanta's business district. Rose Brooks stood at her bus stop, clutching her worn purse, unaware that her world was about to shift beneath her feet. Her phone buzzed with an unusual number of notifications, but she ignored them, focused on remembering Sheila's smile at breakfast. The first hint that something was wrong came in the lobby. The security guard, who usually greeted her warmly, avoided her eyes. In the elevator, 2 women from accounting stopped whispering when she entered, their faces a mixture of judgment and pity. Rose's stomach tightened as she walked through the office. Conversations died as she passed. Sideways glances followed her path to her desk. She logged into her computer with trembling fingers, trying to understand the strange atmosphere. "Did you see it?" A junior associate whispered too loudly to her colleague. "On Atlanta Insider's website?" Rose's fingers froze over her keyboard. With a sense of dread, she opened her browser and typed in the website's name. Her heart stopped. There, splashed across the screen, was a grainy photo of her getting into Ryder's car last Friday night. The headline screamed, "Billionaire's Secret Affair, Ward Industries CEO and Mystery Assistant's Late-Night Rendezvous." The article was worse than the photo. It painted her as a gold digger who had mysteriously secured a high-level position without experience. It hinted at late-night meetings and special treatment. Someone had leaked details about her first night at Ward Industries, twisting her desperate plea for help into something sordid and shameful. Tears burned behind her eyes, but Rose forced them back. She had survived worse. She would survive this too. But when she heard snickering from the break room, followed by crude jokes about sleeping her way to the top, her hands began to shake. "Miss Brooks." Clara's replacement, Sarah, appeared at her desk. "Mr. Ward wants to see you immediately." The walk to his office felt like crossing a minefield. Every step was weighted with stares and whispers. Rose kept her chin up, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She found Ryder's office in chaos. He stood behind his desk, phone to his ear, his face dark with fury. 3 people from PR huddled nearby, tablets in hand, looking terrified. "I don't care about your sources," Ryder was saying, his voice deadly quiet. "You will retract that story within the hour, or I will bury your website in so many lawsuits your grandchildren will be paying legal fees." He slammed the phone down and turned to the PR team. "Get me everything you have on Atlanta Insider's ownership and find out who leaked that photo." "Mr. Ward," one brave soul ventured, "perhaps if we issued a statement—" "Get out." When they hesitated, he barked, "Now." They scattered like leaves in a storm, nearly colliding with Rose in their haste to escape. Ryder's eyes softened when he saw her standing in the doorway. "Rose." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I should have seen this coming. It's not your fault." Her voice was steady, though her hands weren't. "You were just being kind, driving me home." "Kind?" He laughed bitterly. "I was trying to protect you from exactly this kind of attack. I failed." Rose squared her shoulders. "I should resign." "Absolutely not. But the company's reputation will survive." Ryder came around the desk. "You earned your place here, Rose. Your work is exceptional. I won't let them drive you out with lies." A tear escaped despite her best efforts. "They're saying such horrible things." "They're wrong." His voice was gentle but firm. "You know the truth. I know the truth. Sheila knows the truth." Sheila's name steadied her, as it always did. "She trusts you, you know. Calls you Uncle Ryder when she talks about my job." Something flickered in Ryder's eyes. "Does she?" Rose nodded, wiping her cheek. "I should get back to work." "Take the day off." "No." She straightened her spine. "That would only feed the rumors. I won't hide." Pride flickered across his face. "Then let's give them something else to talk about. We have the Johnson merger meeting at 11. I want you to lead the presentation." "But I've never—" "You know the numbers better than anyone. Show them why you're here." The rest of the day was a blur of determined focus. Rose threw herself into the presentation, letting facts and figures shield her from whispers and stares. When she stood before the boardroom, her voice never wavered. The Johnson representatives left impressed, and even the board members who had looked at her skeptically had to acknowledge her expertise. By evening, Atlanta Insider had retracted their story with a full apology. Ryder's legal team had worked fast, but the damage was done. The whispers remained, like smoke after a fire. Rose caught the early bus home, exhausted but somehow stronger. The door to her apartment had never looked more welcoming. Inside, she found Sheila at the kitchen table, surrounded by crayons and paper. Mrs. Lillian, their elderly neighbor who watched Sheila after school, looked up from her knitting. "Mommy!" Sheila's face lit up. "Look what I drew!" Rose bent to examine the picture. Two stick figures stood holding hands. One tall in what looked like a suit, one smaller with long brown hair. Behind them was a big grey building that could only be Ward Industries. "That's you and Uncle Ryder," Sheila explained proudly. "He makes you smile at work, so I drew him smiling too." Tears welled up again, but this time they didn't hurt. Rose hugged her daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Can I hang it up?" "I want to give it to him." Sheila bounced in her seat. "Can I? Please?" Rose hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe next time he visits." After Mrs. Lillian left and Sheila was tucked into bed, Rose sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the drawing. Such innocent love, such pure trust. Her daughter saw only the good in people, untainted by the world's judgment. She touched the crayon suit of stick-figure Ryder, remembering his fierce defense of her today. In Sheila's simple drawing, there were no headlines, no whispers, no cruel assumptions, just two people standing together, smiling. Rose carefully placed the drawing in a folder to take to work tomorrow. Perhaps Sheila's truth was the only truth that mattered. The whispers didn't stop entirely, but they changed tone. As days passed, even the harshest critics couldn't deny Rose's competence. She moved through the office with quiet grace, her work speaking louder than any rumor. One morning, Ryder called her into his office. "Close the door, please." Rose's heart skipped, but his expression wasn't stern. It was almost excited. "I've been thinking," he said, standing by the window. "About what you told me about Sheila's medical bills, about other families facing the same struggle." He turned, his eyes bright with purpose. "I'm promoting you to Director of Community Outreach. We're starting a new initiative, medical funding for low-income children." Rose sat down hard. "But I don't have the experience." "You have the heart," Ryder interrupted, "and the first-hand knowledge. The rest we'll figure out together." Together. The word hung in the air between them. "When do we start?" she asked. He smiled. "Right now." The next weeks blurred into a whirlwind of activity. They worked late into evenings, spreading papers across conference tables, building something meaningful from scratch. Ryder insisted on reviewing every detail personally: eligibility criteria, application processes, partnership agreements with hospitals. "These numbers don't work," he'd say, rubbing his tired eyes. "We need to help more families." Rose watched him revise budgets again and again, squeezing out every possible dollar for the program. This wasn't the cold businessman others saw. This was someone who cared deeply, who wouldn't rest until things were right. They fell into a routine of working dinners, Chinese takeout, or sandwiches spread across his desk. One evening, picking at her lo mein, Rose found herself telling him about the night Sheila first got sick. "The fever came so fast," she said softly. "I can still feel how hot her little body was. I drove to 3 different emergency rooms before one would take our insurance." Ryder set down his chopsticks. "That's why we need clear protocols for emergency admissions in our partner hospitals. No parent should face that." "You really mean to change things, don't you?" "Someone has to." He hesitated. "Your father taught me that." Rose looked up, surprised. He rarely mentioned her father. "Henry caught me sleeping in my car once." Ryder continued. "I was 19, interning here, couldn't afford rent. He gave me his coat, wouldn't take no for an answer. Said everyone deserves warmth." "That sounds like Dad." Rose smiled. "He believed in helping however you could. He changed my life with that simple act of kindness." Ryder's voice was quiet. "I've never forgotten." Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. Rose spoke of her faith, how it carried her through her darkest days. Ryder listened intently, asking questions without judgment. "How do you hold on to it?" he asked one night. "Faith, when everything falls apart." "Sometimes it holds on to me," she answered. "Like now, sitting here. I prayed for help, and here I am, working on a project that will help others like Sheila. That's not coincidence." Ryder considered this, turning a pen between his fingers. "I stopped believing in anything but myself a long time ago. Maybe that's why this matters so much," Rose suggested gently. "You're learning to believe in something bigger." He met her eyes, about to respond, when the lights flickered and went out. Thunder rolled outside. They'd been so absorbed in work they hadn't noticed the storm. "Stay put," Ryder said in the darkness. "I have emergency supplies in the cabinet." Soon, candles flickered across his desk, casting warm shadows on the walls. The storm raged outside, but in here, time seemed to slow down. "Tell me about Sheila," Ryder said suddenly. "Not her illness. Tell me about her." Rose's face softened in the candlelight. "She loves to draw, makes up stories about everything she sees. Yesterday she told me the clouds were having a parade." "She sounds wonderful." "She is." Rose smiled. "Even on her worst days, she finds something to be happy about. Like you giving me this job. She tells everyone her mommy helps Uncle Ryder make other kids better." Something changed in Ryder's expression. "Uncle Ryder." "Oh?" Rose blushed. "I'm sorry, I should have told her not to." "No," he said quickly. "No, I like it." A comfortable silence fell between them. The candles danced, thunder growled distantly, and Rose found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone. About Sheila's first steps, her favorite bedtime stories, the way she insisted on saying good night to the moon. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. A real, full laugh, remembering Sheila's attempt to make breakfast in bed that ended with Cheerios everywhere. The sound seemed to startle them both. Rose couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like that. When she met Ryder's eyes, something in his expression made her breath catch. He was looking at her like he'd never seen her before, like something precious and rare had just been revealed. In the soft candlelight, his usual sharp edges seemed softer, more human. "I haven't heard you laugh before," he said quietly. "I haven't had much reason to lately." "You should laugh more. It suits you." The candlelight flickered between them, and Rose saw something change in Ryder's face, a softening, a cracking open of careful walls. For a moment neither of them spoke, letting the thunder fill the silence. The lights suddenly hummed back to life, breaking the spell. Rose blinked in the brightness, gathering her papers. "It's late," she said. "I should get home to Sheila." Ryder nodded, helping her collect the scattered documents. But something had shifted, something neither of them could name yet. In the warm candlelight of that storm-dark office, they'd seen each other clearly for the first time. Not as boss and employee, not as billionaire and struggling mother, but as two souls who understood pain and hope and the courage it takes to believe in something better. As Rose gathered her things to leave, Ryder spoke softly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me what it means to care." She smiled, holding his gaze for a moment before turning to go. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clean, rain-washed night and the lingering warmth of shared stories in candlelight. Monday morning arrived with an unusually tense atmosphere at Ward Industries. The board members filed into the sleek conference room on the 48th floor, their faces set in stern lines. Ryder sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his posture rigid as steel. "This situation with Miss Brooks has become untenable," Harold Matthews, the senior board member, began. His voice carried the weight of 30 years in corporate leadership. "The rumors are affecting our public image." Ryder's jaw tightened. "Rose Brooks is one of our most valuable employees." "That may be," Patricia Chen interrupted, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "But the public doesn't see an employee. They see a scandal." The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the room. Ryder looked at each board member in turn, noting the judgment in their eyes. "What exactly are you suggesting?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Distance yourself," Matthews said firmly. "Transfer her to another department. Better yet, offer her a generous severance package." Ryder stood slowly, his hands pressed flat against the table. "Let me be absolutely clear. Rose Brooks represents everything Ward Industries claims to stand for: dedication, integrity, and second chances. Firing her would make us hypocrites." "Your position as CEO could be at risk," Patricia warned. "The shareholders are watching closely." "Then let them watch," Ryder replied, his voice sharp as frost. "They'll see a company that stands by its principles." The board members exchanged glances, their disapproval palpable. As they filed out, Ryder heard their whispered conversations, knowing this wouldn't be the end of it. Down on the 35th floor, Rose sat at her desk, aware of the growing tension but unsure of its source. The whispers had changed lately, less about scandal, more about power struggles. She focused on her work, trying to ignore the worried knot in her stomach. That afternoon, Rose took a half-day to visit Sheila at Atlanta Children's Hospital. The pediatric ward was bright with murals and stuffed animals, but Rose's heart still clenched at the sight of her daughter's small form in the hospital bed. "Mommy!" Sheila's face lit up. "Look what came today." The room was filled with flowers, roses, lilies, and cheerful sunflowers. A private nurse in crisp whites was checking Sheila's vital signs. "Miss Brooks." The nurse smiled. "I'm Sarah. Mr. Ward arranged for me to provide specialized care for Sheila until her surgery next week." Rose's throat tightened with emotion. The flowers alone must have cost hundreds of dollars. And a private nurse? She blinked back tears. "Look, Mommy." Sheila held up a card with a little bear on it. "Uncle Ryder sent them. He said they're to help me practice my counting. 100 roses." Rose sat on the edge of the bed, gathering her daughter close. Sheila's dark curls tickled her chin as the little girl pointed out each arrangement, counting with careful precision. That evening, Rose's apartment felt emptier without Sheila, but somehow warmer knowing her daughter was receiving the best care possible. She composed and deleted 5 different thank you messages to Ryder before finally falling asleep. The next morning, she found him in his office before dawn, as usual. He was reviewing documents, his shirt sleeves rolled up, tie slightly loosened. "Mr. Ward," she began. "Ryder," he corrected without looking up. "Ryder, I don't know how to thank you. The flowers, the nurse." He finally met her eyes. "You'd have done the same for me." The simplicity of his response left her speechless. Before she could reply, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. That evening, everything changed. Darren Cole, CEO of rival company Cole Industries, leaked a story to 3 major news outlets. The headlines were devastating. "Ward Industries CEO blackmailed by assistant," and "The truth behind Ward's charity case." Rose didn't see the news until she got home. Her phone was flooded with messages from co-workers and unknown numbers. With trembling hands, she opened the first article. Sources close to Ward Industries claim Rose Brooks, a single mother hired as Ryder Ward's personal assistant, threatened to expose compromising information unless given employment and financial compensation. The nature of this information remains undisclosed. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. This was worse than the affair rumors. This painted her as a criminal, a manipulator. At Ward Industries, Ryder watched the company's stock price drop in real time. 5%, 8%, 10%. His phone rang constantly. Board members, shareholders, reporters. He ignored them all, staring instead at a framed photograph on his wall, his younger self with Henry Brooks, both smiling on a day long ago. The trading day ended with Ward Industries stock down 12%. In the gathering darkness of his office, Ryder's hands clenched into fists. Darren Cole had crossed a line, and tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, his thoughts were with Rose, knowing the pain these lies must be causing her. He picked up his phone to call her, then set it down. Words wouldn't fix this. Action would. Tomorrow, he would show the world exactly what Ward Industries and Rose Brooks stood for. In her apartment, Rose sat in the dark, her phone finally silent. The city lights twinkled outside her window like distant stars, indifferent to the storm brewing in her life. She thought of Sheila, safely sleeping in her hospital bed, surrounded by flowers sent by a man who believed in second chances. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same dignity her father had taught her. The truth would speak for itself. It had to. The night stretched long before her, filled with prayers and quiet determination. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but tonight she held on to one simple truth. "You'd have done the same for me." In those words lay all the strength she needed to face whatever morning might bring. The morning sun cast long shadows through the glass walls of Ward Industries as Rose stepped out of the elevator. The usual buzz of activity felt muted, tense. Employees huddled in corners, whispering and glancing at their phones. The stock had plummeted another 5% before the market even opened. In the executive suite, chaos reigned. PR representatives paced the halls, phones pressed to their ears. Legal advisors rushed between offices with stacks of papers. Rose's desk phone hadn't stopped ringing since she arrived. "Miss Brooks." Caroline from PR approached, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Mr. Ward needs you in the conference room. Now." Rose found Ryder standing at the window, his back rigid. The conference table was covered with newspapers, all bearing variations of the same headline about blackmail and scandal. "Sir, please let me resign," Rose said quietly. "I can't watch your company suffer because of me." Ryder turned, his expression determined. "No, I'm calling a press conference. Today." The PR team erupted in protest. "Mr. Ward, with all due respect, that's suicide." the head of communications argued. Let us handle this through proper channels. We can release carefully worded statements. No more statements, no more hiding. Ryder's voice cut through the noise. Book the main auditorium, 3 o'clock. Rose followed him back to his office. Please don't do this, she begged. The board is already looking for reasons to remove you. If you defend me publicly, then they'll have their reason. He smiled faintly. So be it. The next few hours passed in a blur. Word of the press conference spread quickly. Reporters began gathering outside the building. The board called an emergency meeting, which Ryder refused to attend. At 2:45, Rose watched from backstage as the auditorium filled with journalists, cameras, and industry analysts. Her hands trembled as she straightened Ryder's tie one last time. Mr. Ward, Ryder, please reconsider, she whispered. Everything you've built. He caught her hands in his, steadying them. Some things matter more than buildings and stock prices, Rose. Your father taught me that 20 years ago. The lights dimmed, signaling the start. Ryder stepped onto the stage, cameras flashing like lightning. The room fell silent as he approached the podium. Good afternoon, he began, his voice steady. You're here because you want to know the truth about Rose Brooks. He looked directly into the central camera. She came to me broken, but it was I who needed saving. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Backstage, Rose pressed her hands to her mouth, tears welling up. 6 months ago, Rose Brooks walked into my office, desperate to save her daughter's life. She was willing to sacrifice everything, including her dignity, for her child. But what she didn't know was that 20 years earlier, her father, Henry Brooks, saved me. Ryder's voice softened with emotion. I was a poor intern, wearing a threadbare coat in winter. Henry Brooks, our janitor, gave me his own coat. He said everyone deserves warmth. That simple act of kindness changed my life. The cameras clicked furiously as he continued. Rose Brooks works harder than anyone in this building. She transforms lives with her compassion. She reminds everyone around her that business isn't just about profit. It's about people. In the front row, several board members shifted uncomfortably. But Ryder wasn't finished. The accusations against her are false. The real story is about courage, integrity, and the power of kindness. Rose Brooks didn't blackmail me. She showed me what I'd forgotten. That success means nothing without humanity. The silence broke. Applause erupted from the back of the room, spreading like a wave. Reporters stood, shouting questions. But Ryder had said what he needed to say. 2 hours later, the board convened. The vote was swift and nearly unanimous. By 6 o'clock, Ryder Ward was no longer CEO of Ward Industries. Rose waited by the executive elevator as Ryder emptied his office. He emerged carrying a single cardboard box, 20 years reduced to so little. Inside were his coat from Henry Brooks, some photographs, and a child's drawing from Sheila. Tears streamed down Rose's face as she watched him approach. I'm so sorry, she whispered. This is all my fault. Ryder set down the box and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Don't cry, Rose. You gave me something I never had. Peace. The elevator dinged softly. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the Atlanta skyline in shades of gold and pink. As they stood there, something shifted in the air between them. An ending, yes, but perhaps also a beginning. The box of memories sat between them, a reminder that sometimes losing everything can mean finding what matters most. In the gentle quiet of that moment, both understood that some victories don't come with applause or stock prices, but with the quiet certainty of knowing you've done what's right. The city lights blurred past the car windows like falling stars. Inside Ryder's Mercedes, silence wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. Rose watched raindrops race down the glass. each one catching fragments of streetlights and neon signs. The leather seats still held their new car smell, but something felt different tonight, an ending lingering in the air. Ryder drove with precise movements, his hand steady at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. His suit jacket lay discarded in the back seat, a small sign of the weight he'd shed today. The traffic light ahead turned red, and the car came to a gentle stop. Rose's fingers twisted in her lap. The events of the day played through her mind like scenes from someone else's life. The press conference, the board's decision, Ryder carrying that single box out of his office. Her throat felt tight with unshed tears. "You shouldn't have lost everything for me," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryder's eyes stayed fixed on the road, but something softened in his expression. "Maybe I finally lost what didn't matter," he answered softly. The light turned green, and the car moved forward again. They passed the familiar landmarks of Rose's route home, the corner grocery with its flickering neon sign, the small park where Sheila loved to play, the old church with its weathered steeple reaching towards the stars. Each place held memories now, moments that had shaped the past 6 months. When they pulled up to her apartment building, neither moved immediately. The engine hummed quietly, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Ryder reached into his coat pocket and withdrew an envelope. "This is for you," he said, holding it out. "A reference letter and severance package. It should keep you and Sheila secure for quite a while." Rose's hands trembled as she accepted the envelope. "Thank you," she managed, but the words felt inadequate. Tears spilled over, trailing down her cheeks. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "I know." His voice was gentle. "Sometimes the best things in life come from moments we didn't plan." Through her tears, Rose noticed how tired he looked. Not the sharp-edged exhaustion of their early days, but something deeper, more peaceful, like a man who had finally set down a heavy burden. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Honestly, I don't know." He smiled slightly. "It's been 20 years since I've had to wonder about that." Rose wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'll never be able to repay you for everything you've done for Sheila and me." "You already have," he said simply. "You reminded me who I used to be, who I wanted to be, before the money and the power became everything." A cool breeze rustled through the trees lining the street. Rose gathered her purse and the envelope, her movements slow, as if underwater. "Goodbye, Ryder," she whispered. "Goodbye, Rose." She stepped out of the car, the night air cool against her tear-stained face. At her apartment door, she fumbled with her keys, hearing the soft purr of Ryder's car still idling behind her. Only when she was safely inside did she hear it pull away. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle whir of the window air conditioner. Rose set her things down and moved to Sheila's room, pushing the door open softly. Her daughter lay sleeping peacefully, her small hand curled around the stem of the flower Ryder had given her earlier. A bright yellow daffodil, Sheila's favorite. Rose sank into the chair beside the bed, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall. Sheila's face held that perfect innocence of childhood sleep, unmarked by the day's heavy events. The surgery schedule lay on the nightstand, a reminder of the gift Ryder had given them. Not just money, but a future. "God!" Rose whispered into the darkness, her voice catching. "Please watch over him. He gave up everything to protect us. Please don't let him walk alone." Across town, Ryder's penthouse elevator opened with a soft chime. He stepped into the vast space, now somehow emptier than before. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Atlanta's glittering skyline, a view he'd once considered his crown jewel. In the kitchen, he bypassed the wine cabinet and filled a glass with water instead. The cool liquid helped ease the tightness in his throat. He walked to the windows, his reflection ghosting against the cityscape beyond. How many nights had he stood here, feeling like the king of all he surveyed? The buildings below had been his chess pieces, the streets his board. Now, stripped of titles and power, he saw the city differently, not as a kingdom to rule, but as a community of lives intertwined. Somewhere out there, Rose was tucking Sheila into bed. Somewhere Henry Brooks rested in peace, perhaps smiling at the way his simple act of kindness had rippled through time. And here stood Ryder Ward, no longer CEO, no longer billionaire king, just a man wondering what came next. The water glass felt cool against his palm as he gazed at the twinkling lights below. For the first time in 20 years, his future was unwritten. The thought should have terrified him, but instead he felt something else. Possibility. Like a door opening to let in fresh air. He set the glass down on the marble countertop, its soft clink echoing in the quiet space. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own decisions. But tonight, in this moment between what was and what would be, Ryder felt something he hadn't expected. Peace. The city continued its eternal dance of light and shadow below, but he was no longer its conductor, just a man, standing at his window, ready to write a new chapter. Not as a CEO, but as something perhaps more valuable, a human being who had remembered how to feel. 7 days crept by like honey dripping from a spoon. Rose stood at the window of her small apartment, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The morning air felt different now, lighter somehow, despite the weight of change pressing against her shoulders. Sheila's recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. The doctors called it textbook perfect, but Rose knew better. She'd seen miracles before, wrapped in unexpected packages, like billionaires who remembered old debts and kept their promises. "Mommy, look." Sheila's voice carried from the living room, where she sat cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by colored pencils. "I drew another butterfly." Rose smiled, crossing the room to kneel beside her daughter. The butterfly sparkled with every color Sheila could find, its wings spreading hope across the page. "It's beautiful, sweetheart, just like you." Sheila's chest rose and fell easily now, no more labored breathing, no more midnight scares. The scar from her surgery was healing nicely, a thin pink line that would fade with time. Rose touched it gently each night when she tucked Sheila in, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything, and how far they'd come since that rainy night at Ward Industries. The community centre where Rose now worked part-time sat in a converted Victorian house, its wooden floors creaking with history and its walls lined with children's artwork. Miss Sarah, the director, had hired her on the spot when Rose mentioned her experience organising at Ward Industries. "We need someone with both heart and head," she'd said, and Rose had found herself nodding, fighting back tears. 3 days a week, she helped coordinate after-school programs and family support services. The salary was modest, but the work filled her soul in ways she hadn't expected. Each struggling mother who walked through those doors reminded her of herself just a few months ago, desperate, afraid, but refusing to give up. "Time for your medicine, baby," Rose called to Sheila, who made a face but didn't protest. The pills were expensive, part of a long-term treatment plan that had seemed impossible before everything changed. Rose's hand trembled as she reached for the morning mail. Bills, advertisements, and then her heart stopped. A cream-colored envelope, heavy paper, no return address. Inside, she found a letter from a foundation she'd never heard of, along with documentation showing all of Sheila's follow-up treatments had been paid in full. She sank into a kitchen chair, the paper trembling in her hands. The foundation's name was generic enough, Second Chances Medical Fund. But something about the letterhead tickled her memory. The font was the same one Ryder had always preferred for important documents. "What is it, Mummy?" Sheila padded over, her butterfly drawing clutched in one hand. Just some good news, sweetheart." Rose pulled her daughter close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Someone very kind is helping us with your doctor visits." Sheila's face brightened. "Was it Uncle Ryder? He always helps." Rose's throat tightened. "Maybe, baby, maybe." She hadn't heard from him since that night he'd driven her home. The news had covered his departure from Ward Industries extensively at first. Speculation about corporate takeovers, business rivalries, potential comebacks. But Ryder had vanished from public view, leaving only whispers and wondering in his wake. At work that afternoon, Rose sorted through donation requests, while half listening to two volunteers discuss the latest charity gossip. "Did you hear about that mystery man visiting women's shelters?" One asked. "They say he just listens to their stories, takes notes, then disappears." Rose's hand stilled on the paperwork. "I heard he's some kind of millionaire." The other volunteer added. "My cousin works at Hope Haven, says he spent 3 hours there last Tuesday, just talking to the residents. Probably writing a book or something." The first woman shrugged. But Rose knew better. She could picture Ryder, his expensive suit exchanged for something less conspicuous, sitting quietly as women shared their struggles, taking notes in his precise handwriting, asking careful questions, building something new from the ashes of his old life. That evening, after tucking Sheila in, Rose sat at her small desk and pulled out a notepad. She'd started keeping a journal of sorts, recording the small miracles that seemed to follow in Ryder's wake. Anonymous donations to the community centre. A new playground appearing overnight at the children's hospital. Scholarships for single mothers returning to school. No proof, of course. Nothing that could be traced directly back to him. But Rose recognized his fingerprints on each act of kindness. Methodical, thorough, leaving no detail unconsidered. She wrote by lamplight until her eyes grew heavy, documenting the day's events. The mysterious envelope, the gossip about shelter visits, Sheila's butterfly drawing, which now hung proudly on the refrigerator. As she got ready for bed, Rose caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The worried lines around her eyes had softened. Her shoulders stood straighter. The woman who had stumbled into Ward Industries that rainy night, clutching an eviction notice and the last shreds of her dignity, had been transformed, not by money or charity, but by something far more precious, the knowledge that sometimes, when you reach your breaking point, the universe sends exactly what you need. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stern-faced billionaire who remembers an old debt. Sometimes it arrives as an anonymous envelope in the morning mail. Across town, in a modest house on the outskirts of Atlanta, Ryder sat at a simple wooden desk, reviewing his notes from the day's shelter visits. Each story he'd heard echoed with familiar themes: medical bills, job losses, impossible choices. Each reminded him of Rose, of the courage it had taken to walk into his office that night. He'd traded his penthouse for this quiet space, his designer suits for clothes that wouldn't intimidate the women he interviewed. His phone rarely rang now, and when it did, it was usually about something that mattered: a shelter needing funds, a single mother requiring emergency assistance. The Second Chances Medical Fund was just the beginning. He had plans, carefully crafted ones that would take time to implement. But for the first time in his life, Ryder wasn't rushing toward some artificial finish line. He was building something sustainable, something that would outlast him. Pictures from the shelters covered one wall of his study. Faces of women and children who reminded him why he'd walked away from his empire without regret. In the center, though he'd never admit it to anyone, hung Sheila's first drawing for him, a stick figure labelled Uncle Ryder, standing beside a smiling son. He turned back to his notes, adding details about today's interviews. Each story strengthened his resolve, each tear and triumph reminding him of the night that had changed everything. The night Rose Brooks had walked into his office, carrying not just her own desperate need, but the key to his redemption. The morning sunlight streamed through the community center's windows as Rose sorted through a stack of paperwork. 3 months had passed since that final night at Ward Industries. The world had moved on, corporate scandals replaced by newer dramas, but the memory remained fresh in her mind. Sheila's recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. The surgery, paid for by Ryder's generosity, had given her daughter a second chance at life. Now 8 years old, she bounded with energy that still amazed Rose, her small heart strong and steady. "Ms. Brooks?" Sarah, one of the volunteers, rushed into the office clutching a newspaper. "You need to see this." Rose looked up from her desk, noting the excitement in the young woman's face. "What is it?" "Front page of the business section." Sarah spread the paper across Rose's desk, pointing to the headline that made Rose's heart skip a beat. "Former billionaire Ryder Ward launches the Brooks Foundation for Women and Children in Crisis." Rose's hands trembled as she picked up the paper. The black and white photograph showed Ryder standing before a podium, looking different than she remembered. More relaxed, though just as determined. His expensive suit had been replaced by a simple button-down shirt and blazer. She began reading, her voice barely above a whisper. In a surprise announcement yesterday, former Ward Industries CEO Ryder Ward unveiled his latest venture, the Brooks Foundation, a $50 million initiative dedicated to supporting women and children in crisis. The foundation, named after former Ward Industries janitor Henry Brooks and his daughter Rose Brooks, will focus on providing medical assistance, educational opportunities, and emergency support to families facing desperate circumstances. Rose's vision blurred with tears as she continued reading. The article detailed the foundation's mission: to create a network of support centers across the state, offering everything from medical care to job training. It was exactly what she and Ryder had discussed during those late nights at the office, when dreams seemed possible and the world less harsh. "The name choice is no coincidence," the article continued, quoting Ryder directly. "Henry Brooks taught me about dignity when I was young and had none. His daughter Rose reminded me of that lesson when I needed it most. This foundation honors their legacy of quiet courage and unwavering faith in humanity's capacity for good." Sarah squeezed Rose's shoulder. "It's beautiful what he's done." Rose nodded, unable to speak. She remembered her father, his gentle hands, his quiet wisdom, the way he'd treated everyone with equal respect, regardless of their status. She'd never known he'd helped Ryder, but somehow it didn't surprise her. It was exactly the kind of thing Henry Brooks would have done without fanfare or expectation of recognition. The next morning, as Rose prepared Sheila's breakfast, a crisp white envelope arrived by courier. Her name was written in Ryder's distinctive handwriting, precise yet somehow elegant. Inside, she found a letter on simple stationery, no corporate letterhead or fancy embossing. "Dear Rose," it began, "I hope this finds you and Sheila well. The foundation launches next month, and there's only one person I trust to lead it. Someone who understands both sides of the desk, what it means to need help and what it means to give it with dignity." Rose sank into a kitchen chair, her heart pounding as she read on. "The position of executive director comes with full benefits, including comprehensive medical coverage for Sheila. The salary is significant, though I know that's not what matters to you. What matters is the chance to help others the way you once needed help yourself." She could almost hear his voice, steady and certain, as she read the final paragraph. The world needs more people like you, Rose. So do I. If you're willing to consider this opportunity, I'd like to meet and discuss the details. No pressure, no obligations. Just two people who learned that sometimes losing everything means finding what matters most. The letter was signed simply, Ryder, with a phone number below. Sheila's voice broke through her thoughts. Mommy, why are you crying? Rose hadn't even realized tears were falling. She pulled Sheila into a hug, breathing in the sweet scent of her daughter's shampoo. Happy tears, sweetheart. Sometimes good things happen that remind us God is listening. Is it about Uncle Ryder? Sheila asked, wise beyond her years. Rose smiled, remembering how Ryder had always treated Sheila with such gentle respect, never talking down to her despite her age. Yes, baby. He's started something wonderful, and he's asked Mommy to help. Are you going to? Rose looked at the letter again, then at her daughter's hopeful face. The community center had been a blessing, a safe harbor when she needed one most. But this was a chance to create something lasting, to help others find their way back from the edge of desperation. She reached for her phone, her fingers steady as she dialed the number. It rang twice before his familiar voice answered. Rose. He said her name like a complete sentence, like it held meaning beyond its single syllable. I'd like to hear more, she said simply. Coffee tomorrow? 10 o'clock at Saint's Corner Cafe? She remembered the small cafe, just 2 blocks from where Ward Industries towered over the city. I'll be there. After hanging up, Rose stood at her kitchen window, watching the morning sun paint the world in shades of possibility. 3 months ago, she'd thought everything was ending. Now she understood. Sometimes endings were just beginnings in disguise. Sheila tugged at her sleeve. Can I draw Uncle Ryder another picture? Rose smiled, remembering the first drawing that had hung in his office, the only personal touch in that pristine space. Of course, sweetheart. I think he'd like that very much. As Sheila settled at the table with her crayons, Rose thought about the foundation's name, the Brooks Foundation. Not named after wealth or power, but after a janitor who'd shown kindness to a lonely young man, and a woman who'd walked into a tower one rainy night with nothing left but faith. Tomorrow she would meet Ryder, and they would begin building something new from the pieces of their broken paths. But for now, she watched her daughter draw, listened to her hum softly, and gave thanks for the mysterious ways grace worked in the world, through rain and tears, through loss and love, through the simple act of remembering to be kind. Rose parked her second-hand car outside the renovated brick building in downtown Atlanta. The old warehouse had been transformed, its weathered exterior now gleaming with fresh paint and new windows that caught the morning sun. A sign above the entrance read, "The Brooks Foundation," in simple, dignified letters. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt, the nicest one she owned, bought for special occasions. Through the glass doors, she could see people moving about, carrying supplies and chatting animatedly. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The interior buzzed with activity. Volunteers in paint-splattered clothes worked on walls, transforming stark white into warm, welcoming colors. The scent of fresh paint and sawdust filled the air. Several people smiled and nodded as she passed, making her feel instantly welcome. Then she saw him. Ryder Ward, former CEO of a billion-dollar empire, wore faded jeans and a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, paintbrush in hand. Paint speckled his forearms, and his usually perfect hair was slightly mussed. He looked more human than she'd ever seen him. He turned, and their eyes met. His face softened into a warm smile that reached his eyes. "You came," he said simply, putting down his paintbrush. Rose felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Of course I did." They stood there for a moment, 3 months of separation hanging between them like a gauzy curtain. Not quite a barrier, but something that needed to be pushed aside. "Let me show you around," he said, gesturing to the space around them. "We've been working on this for 2 months now." As they walked, Ryder explained his vision. The first floor would house emergency services, a 24-hour intake center, temporary shelter spaces, and a medical clinic. "We've already partnered with 3 hospitals," he explained, leading her past rooms being furnished with beds and basic necessities. The second floor held classrooms and a daycare center. "Education and childcare," Ryder said, "so mothers can attend job training or interviews without worry." The walls here were painted in cheerful colors, with children's artwork already decorating some spaces. Rose touched a small table, sized for children, remembering how Sheila used to struggle with her homework while Rose worked late shifts. "This will change lives," she whispered. "That's the plan," Ryder agreed softly. "But it needs the right person to lead it." They climbed to the 3rd floor, where administrative offices were being set up. Ryder opened a door to a corner office with large windows overlooking the city. A desk sat ready, with a comfortable chair and a small sofa for visitors. "This would be your office," he said, watching her face carefully. "If you accept." Rose walked to the window, trying to steady her breathing. "Ryder, I don't have the experience for this." He moved to stand beside her. "You have exactly the experience this foundation needs. You know what it means to fight for survival while keeping your dignity. You understand the shame, the fear, the desperate choices people face." His voice grew softer. "And you know how to help without making others feel small." Rose turned to face him, tears threatening despite her best efforts. "Why did you name it after us? After my father?" "Because Henry Brooks taught me that true worth isn't measured in dollars. And you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You reminded me of that lesson when I needed it most." A tear escaped despite Rose's attempts to hold it back. "I accept," she said quietly. "Of course I accept." Ryder's smile was genuine, lighting up his entire face. "Then welcome home, Rose." He held out his hand, then seemed to think better of it and pulled her into a brief, warm hug instead. When they separated, both slightly embarrassed by the display of emotion, Ryder cleared his throat. "There's someone else who wants to see you," he said, opening the office door. Mrs. Lillian, Rose's elderly neighbor who had helped care for Sheila, stood there beaming. "I'm your new volunteer coordinator," she announced proudly. "Mr. Ward hired me last week." Rose looked at Ryder in surprise. He shrugged, a slight smile playing at his lips. "We need people who understand compassion," he said simply. As Rose embraced Mrs. Lillian, she realized that sometimes life's greatest gifts came disguised as losses. Here, in this building named for a kind janitor and his daughter, something beautiful was being born from the ashes of scandal and sacrifice. The day's warmth lingered in the concrete beneath them as Rose and Ryder sat on the rooftop of the Brooks Foundation building. The setting sun painted Atlanta's skyline in shades of amber and rose, while the first stars began to twinkle overhead. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of magnolia blossoms from the nearby park. Rose hugged her knees to her chest, taking in the view. The city spread out before them like a tapestry of lights and shadows, each building telling its own story. From up here, Ward Industries Tower stood proud against the darkening sky, a reminder of everything that had changed. "I still can't believe all of this," Rose said softly, gesturing to the building below them. "What you've created here, it's going to help so many people." Her voice caught slightly. "Thank you, Ryder, for everything." Ryder sat beside her, his tie loosened and jacket discarded hours ago. He shook his head, a gentle smile playing at his lips. "You're the one who showed me what wealth really means," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that had been absent in their early days together. Rose laughed softly, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. The sound reminded Ryder of that night in his office during the power outage, when he'd first heard her genuine laughter. It seemed like a lifetime ago. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the city transformed into a glittering wonderland of lights. The peace between them felt earned, hard-won through months of trials and trust built step by step. Traffic sounds drifted up from the streets below, a distant symphony of urban life. Rose wrapped her arms tighter around her knees, lost in thought. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "That night, when I first came to your office," she paused, gathering courage. "I said, 'Please, just make it quick.'" The memory hung between them, heavy with the weight of desperation and shame that had brought her there. Rose's fingers twisted nervously in her lap, remembering the rain-soaked woman she'd been, clutching that crumpled eviction notice. Ryder turned to look at her, his expression gentle and understanding. The hardness that had once defined his features had softened over the months, replaced by something warmer, more human. "I did, Rose," he said softly. "I made it quick, the moment I chose kindness instead of pride." The simple truth in his words broke something open inside her. Rose covered her face with her hands, tears slipping between her fingers as she wept softly. All the fear, shame, and gratitude she'd carried for months poured out in those quiet tears. Ryder reached out, placing his hand over hers. His touch was warm and steady, an anchor in the storm of her emotions. He didn't try to stop her tears or dismiss them with empty words. Instead, he sat with her in that moment, sharing the weight of everything they'd been through. The city lights blurred through Rose's tears, transforming into a kaleidoscope of color. A warm evening breeze dried her tears, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. Below them, volunteers were still working, their voices drifting up occasionally, a reminder of the purpose they'd found together. Ryder's hand remained on hers, neither of them feeling the need to move or break the moment. The touch spoke of understanding, of shared battles and mutual respect. It held the memory of that first night, when desperation met compassion, and the long journey that had led them here. In the distance, a church bell chimed the hour, its deep tones rolling across the cityscape. The sound reminded Rose of saying prayers with Sheila, of keeping faith even in the darkest moments. Now, sitting here on this rooftop with Ryder, she felt those prayers had been answered in ways she never could have imagined. The evening air grew cooler, but neither made any move to leave. The foundation building below them stood as a testament to transformation, not just of brick and mortar, but of hearts and lives. Tomorrow it would begin its work of helping others find their way out of darkness, just as Rose had. Ryder's hand tightened briefly over hers, a gesture of reassurance and shared purpose. They remained there as the last colors of sunset faded from the sky, two people who had found something precious in the midst of loss, the true meaning of wealth, measured not in dollars, but in the currency of compassion and second chances. The foundation's grand opening arrived on a perfect autumn afternoon. Sunshine spilled through the newly installed windows, casting warm light across the polished floors where hundreds of guests gathered. The renovated building hummed with excitement and possibility. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the cloudless sky. Reporters adjusted their cameras and microphones, all eager to capture the moment when the Brooks Foundation for Women and Children officially opened its doors. Rose stood backstage, smoothing her navy blue dress with trembling hands. She'd practiced her speech countless times, but her heart still fluttered with nervous energy. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see the packed auditorium, community leaders, donors, and families who would benefit from the Foundation's programs. "You're going to do great." Ryder's voice came from behind her, steady and reassuring. He looked different from the stern CEO she'd first met, more relaxed in his charcoal suit, his eyes carrying a warmth that had become familiar over the past months. "I just want to do this justice," Rose whispered, "to honor what we've built here." "Just speak from your heart," he said softly. "That's what got us here in the first place." The program director's voice filled the auditorium, introducing Rose. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage. Camera flashes sparkled like stars as she approached the podium. Ryder took his place several steps behind her, a quiet presence of support. "Good afternoon," Rose began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "A year ago, I stood in the rain outside a different building, holding nothing but desperation and a prayer." She paused, meeting the audience's eyes. "Today I stand before you holding something far more precious. Hope." As she spoke, her words painted pictures of struggle and redemption, of dignity found in the darkest moments. "This foundation isn't just about providing shelter or medical care," she continued. "It's about recognizing the sacred worth in every person who walks through these doors. It's about offering second chances with respect, understanding that sometimes our greatest falls can lead to our highest purposes." The audience leaned forward, caught in the authenticity of her words. In the front row, Mrs. Lillian, who had watched Sheila so many nights, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Faith isn't just about believing in miracles," Rose said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "It's about recognizing them when they appear in unexpected forms, in a kind word, in a helping hand, in someone who sees your worth when you've forgotten it yourself." Just then, a familiar giggle echoed through the auditorium. Sheila, wearing a yellow dress that matched her bright spirit, darted across the stage. Her cheeks were pink with health, her heart surgery now months behind her. "Uncle Ryder!" she called out joyfully, running straight to him. Ryder's face broke into a wide smile as he caught her in his arms, lifting her up. The audience melted, their applause spontaneous and warm. The moment captured everything the Foundation stood for: healing, connection, and the pure joy of second chances. Rose turned to watch them, her eyes meeting Ryder's over Sheila's head. Their shared smile spoke volumes of gratitude, of purpose found, of peace hard won through trust and time. The cameras flashed rapidly, capturing this unscripted moment of genuine emotion. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of ribbon-cutting, tours, and congratulations. As evening approached, the golden light of sunset painted the walls in warm hues. Guests gradually filtered out, their voices full of excitement about the Foundation's future. Finally, only a handful of staff remained, cleaning up and preparing for tomorrow's first official day of operation. Rose walked through the quiet halls, taking in the transformation. Each room had been carefully designed to welcome and comfort. Soft colors, comfortable furniture, spaces where dignity could take root and grow. She found Ryder in what would be her office, standing by the window. The city stretched out below, bathed in twilight's glow. "I should do one final walk through," she said, keys jingling in her hand. "I'll join you," he offered, falling into step beside her. Together they moved through the building, checking doors and windows. Their footsteps echoed in the empty halls, but the silence between them felt comfortable, filled with shared understanding. This place held both their dreams now, his resources and her heart combining to create something greater than either could have imagined alone. At the main entrance, Rose turned the key in the lock, listening to the solid click. The sound felt significant somehow, like the period at the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Through the glass doors, the golden twilight painted the world in gentle colors. They stepped outside together, the evening air soft against their skin. The city had grown quiet, as if holding its breath in this moment. The world felt still, healed, and full of hope. So different from that desperate, rainy night that had brought them together. Rose thought about that moment now, standing beside Ryder in the gathering dusk. She remembered her prayer for a quick miracle, never imagining how God would answer, not with an instant solution, but with a journey that had transformed them both. The truth settled over her with perfect clarity. Sometimes the quickest miracle is the one that takes a lifetime to recognize. The words hung in the golden air between them, a testament to faith rewarded and lives redeemed, not in an instant, but in the patient unfolding of grace through time. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.